Hello, I'm Larry Wilson, and welcome to this segment in our study on the book of Daniel. We're talking about the arrival and appearing of the horn power of Daniel 8. He will be a stern-faced king. He will appear during the appointed time of the end, which is a time of wrath. He will come with his angels. He is the angel king of the abyss. He is the man of sin. He is evil personified. And if an evil but glorious and powerful being claiming to be God came to earth with 200 million angels, how much room would there be to argue with him? This is the point where Daniel 8 is focusing our attention. You see, there's nothing like this that has ever happened. And so the Bible has to give us some parallels to work with. For example, you remember how the little horn in Daniel 7 grew up, became stouter than the other horns, and ruled over them. You remember how that the little horn of Daniel 7, which came up out of Rome, plucked up 3 of the horns, and then it had the eyes and mouth of a man, and it could speak boastfully, and it could do things the others couldn't. Well, the parallel in Daniel 8 is identical, but the players are different. The horn power in Daniel 8 is the devil, who will physically appear during the Great Tribulation. And when he does appear with his angels, a large retinue of angels, he will be King of Kings and Lord of Lords over the earth. Daniel 8 is trying to help us see that. And the parallel between Daniel 8 and 7 is very interesting and important, but the entities are very different. The parallels are the same. Just as the little horn in Daniel 7 ruled over the 7 horns for 1,260 years, the little horn of Daniel 8 is going to rule over the world for 1,335 days, essentially. The parallel is the same. The players are different. Looking over the whole of Daniel 8, we find that God put 2 ancient kingdoms in this end-time vision to make sure that everyone understands that the horn power in Daniel 8 does not come out of an earthly empire like the little horn of Daniel 7. The little horn in Daniel 8 is not an extension of the United States or Europe or Australia or any country or nation. The point in Daniel 8 is separation. The horn power in Daniel 8 is detached from all earthly kingdoms. The stern-faced king in Daniel 8 has a supernatural origin. He comes out of nowhere, literally the north sky. Comes down out of the north. And when he becomes visible, the wicked people of earth will be astonished. Let's go to the screen here, and I want you to look at this text in Revelation 17, verse 8. The angel told John, the beast that comes up from the abyss, the angel king is also called a beast in Revelation. He's the lamb-like beast. He's like the lamb. He's an impostor of the lamb, and that's why he's called a beast. The beast from the abyss, which John you saw, once was visible. But when he was kicked out of heaven, he is now not visible. On Resurrection Sunday, Lucifer was kicked out of heaven. John was shown the war in Revelation chapter 12, verse 7 and onward. There was war in heaven. And so the beast you saw once was visible, because you could see it. Once was seeable, now is not seeable or visible, and will come up out of the abyss and be seeable. But he's going to his destruction. The importance of this phrase is that he will appear to be almighty, invincible, but he's going to his destruction. God will take care of it. But he gets his day. The devil gets his day. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life. So we're talking about the wicked. The wicked people of earth will be astonished when they, what? See what was previously unseeable. When they see the beast, because he once was visible, now is not visible, and yet will come up out of the abyss and be visible. Ezekiel calls Lucifer the king of Tyre, who thinks he is a god, but God says he is a man. Isaiah calls Lucifer the king of Babylon, who thought he would set his throne above Almighty God. In fact, you can read, I hope you will read, Ezekiel chapter 28. This is where Ezekiel calls Lucifer, who thinks he is a god, and says he is a man. Read Ezekiel 28. Isaiah calls Lucifer the king of Babylon, who thought he would put his throne above God's throne. And Lucifer is described in many different ways in the Bible because each definition expands the scope of his character and the nature of his appearing. That's why he has many different descriptive titles. And some people say, but wait a minute, Larry, Lucifer cannot be the man of sin. Lucifer is a fallen angel. An angel is not a man. Well, let's ask Isaiah about this. Isaiah 14:12. How have you fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn? You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the uttermost heights of the sacred mountain. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. Who's Isaiah talking about? Lucifer. But you are brought down to the grave, to the depths of the pit. Those who see, there's that word. Those who see you stare at you. They ponder your fate. They say, quote, is this the man who shook the earth and made kingdoms tremble? The man who made the world a desert, destruction? Who overthrew its cities and would not let his captives return home? Why is he called a man? Lucifer is called a man because he's mortal. He is not a god. He is like man. He is mortal, and he will be destroyed. He does not have immortality. He does not have an immortal soul that has existed from times past to times future. He was created, and he will be annihilated. The angel Gabriel, it may surprise you, is also called a man in the Bible. How an angel is called a man is interesting. Daniel 8:15. Daniel writes, while I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there before me stood one who looked like a man. And I heard a man's voice from the Ulai River calling, Gabriel, that's who the man is, Gabriel, tell this man, Daniel, the meaning of the vision. Let's jump forward to Daniel 9:20. While I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sins of my people Israel, and making my request to the Lord my God for his holy hill, Mount Zion, while I was still in prayer, Gabriel, the man I had seen in the earlier vision, came to me in swift flight about the time of the evening sacrifice. The point here is that Lucifer, like Michael Jesus, will be permitted to take on the visible form of a man. This is why he's called the man of sin. The last matter in Daniel 8 that needs some discussion is the time period of the 2300 evenings and mornings. I need to explain several things about the 2300 days because this particular time period drives people crazy. Daniel chapter 8 is outlined very elegantly in three parts. Verses 3 and 4, we have a ram. And we know that that represents the kingdoms of the Medes and Persians. We know that from verse 20. And then verses 5 through 8, 4 verses, are dedicated to the goat, which represents the kingdom of Grecia, and the notable horn represented Alexander the Great, and the notable horn and was broken off at the height of its power, and then his kingdom was divided up among, the 4 generals of Alexander's army. Then verses 9 through 12 focus on the horn power, and the vision ends in verse 12. The sequence, the apocalyptic sequence ends, I should say, instead of the vision. The apocalyptic sequence ends in verse 12. And then some commentary starts at verse 13 and goes to the end of the chapter. So the horn power is the part of the vision that belongs at the appointed time of the end. The ram and the goat. Well, let me take you to this picture for a moment. You may recall that in Daniel 2, we have the chest and the thighs. In Daniel 7, we have the bear and the leopard. And in Daniel 8, we have the ram and the goat. And we know how in Daniel 11 that the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians and the Grecians is clearly identified by the list of kings that will come. So this becomes, these two kingdoms, if you will, become a very secure historical time period that God has established in 4 prophecies. Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8, and Daniel 11. The reason God did this is because in Daniel 8, God is going to anchor a prophecy of 2,300 years from the time period of the ram, because we're moving in this vision toward the time of wrath, the appointed time of the end. And the horn power will appear down here at the time of the end. In fact, Revelation amplifies this and tells us that the devil, Lucifer, the Antichrist, will appear at the 5th trumpet, which, as I understand it, is about 890 days into the Great Tribulation, and the Great Tribulation is a total of 1,335 days. So that the horn power is going to appear and live on earth with his angels for about a year before he is destroyed. If you subtract 890 from 1335, that's 445 days, which is a little more than a year. A year maybe in 3 months? Something like that. That's a long time for the devil to be tearing up the earth and killing people, given the enormous power that he has. And you may recall from our study of Daniel 7 how that the little horn power would persecute the saints for a time, times and half a time, and that ended in 1798. But then in Daniel 7, verse 11, after Jesus is given a kingdom and so forth, Daniel's view returns to the little horn, and he sees the little horn boasting. Well, this is the 890 days that takes place before the devil gets here. So here we have the little horn boasting during the Great Tribulation, and when the devil gets here, he casts all the starry hosts, all the false religions down to the earth and stomps them in the ground, making them powerless and useless. In the prophecy of Daniel 11, represented by this top line up here, you can see the king of the north and the horn power of Daniel 8 are the same entity, and it's just repetition and enlargement as it has been all through the book of Daniel. And the first point that I want to bring up now is we have studied already the 70 weeks of Daniel 9. We have studied the Jubilee calendar. We have studied the death of Christ in the middle of the 70th week and the precision that's all involved with this. We've covered that in 4 studies. So I'm assuming that you're now well informed on the Jubilee calendar and the 70 weeks, and you know that it is impossible for the 70th week to be in the future. You know where the 70th week is, and you know how that Jesus has confirmed the validity of this interpretation by appearing and dying right on time, and even in fact observing Passover with his disciples right on time just before he was crucified. So we know where the 70 weeks are located. We know their place in history. We know that the decree of Artaxerxes in 457 BC is where the 69 weeks began. We know it's a Jubilee year, so the 7 and 62 make 69. We know it's the great day of Tuesday in the great week, in the calendar of the great week, and the 70 weeks range between 457 BC and they end with the sabbatical year of AD 33. We also know that Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70, just as it's predicted in Daniel 9. Totally destroyed. And then God later had the Muslims build a temple on the mount so that never again could a temple be built bearing his name. Okay, I'm assuming that you have been with me on this study of Daniel, and all of you are familiar with all of these parts and pieces, and as we're now in the 3rd study on Daniel 8, you should be very clear in your understanding about these matters. If you aren't, I don't know what else I can do for you. Okay, now that you know these things, let's go back to the computer screen and notice the commentary that begins on the sequence. The sequence I just showed you is 2 verses given to the ram, and then the next 4 verses given to the goat, and then 5 verses dedicated to the horn power, and the next thing that happens in verse 13 is a question. Daniel hears 2 angels discussing the horn power. And I'm going to paraphrase Daniel 8, verse 13 and 14. So listen carefully and think about the way I have paraphrased this. Now, I'm not taking too many liberties. I'm just trying to take enough to help you see how the language flows. Daniel writes, "Then I heard a Holy One speaking, an angel, and another Holy One said to him," a second angel, "How long will it take for this vision to be fulfilled?" In other words, how long will it be before the horn power appears? The one that takes away the daily, that is, the horn power that leads the world into rebellion, that causes total destruction and desolation, the horn power that causes the surrender of the sanctuary services in heaven's temple, and of the starry host that will be trampled underfoot by him. How long will it be before he appears? Daniel 8:14. He said to me, "It will take 2,300 evenings and mornings. Then the sanctuary, the true sanctuary in heaven, will be reconsecrated or restored or cleansed, as it says in the King James Version. And after this, the horn power shall appear." The thing that has driven prophecy students crazy for 2,000 years with Daniel is that the question raised in Daniel 8:13 does not appear to be answered in Daniel 8:14, the verse that follows. In Daniel 8:13, the one angel says, well, how long is it going to be before this vision is fulfilled and the horn power that does all these evil things shows up? And then the second angel says in verse 14, well, it'll be 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be cleansed. Well, how does that answer the question? Well, it doesn't at first. But the more you investigate this, the better that answer gets. Here's why. Because before the horn power can appear, a certain service, a certain process must take place in heaven. And by stating the location in time for that service, the answer then is this. I'll tell you when the horn power will appear. It will be after the sanctuary has begun to be cleansed. Very clever. Very clever. Why is cleansing the sanctuary in heaven such a big deal? Well, it's a very big deal because the cleansing of the sanctuary in heaven is the process that Jesus goes through to make up the kingdom that was given to him in 1798. In other words, in 1798, Jesus is found worthy to receive a kingdom. We've covered this at length in Daniel 7, our study there, so I assume you're up to full speed on this. Jesus is found worthy to receive a kingdom in 1798, and the Father steps aside and gives everything to him. And then Jesus, then, in 1844, at the end of the 2,300 years of Daniel 8:14, Jesus begins going through the books of record to determine who will inherit the earth, who will be a part of his kingdom. It's the judgment of mankind, and it begins with the judgment of the dead, and that goes on until we come to the Great Tribulation, which is where the judgment of the living occurs. The cleansing of heaven's temple is actually the judgment process. Jesus is removing the guilt, the records of sin, the guilt of sin, from off the horns of the altar, just like they did in the earthly sanctuary. Remember, what's in heaven is is the true sanctuary, and what was on earth is just a copy of the true thing. So, when the angel responded to the first angel, and he said, look, it'll take 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary in heaven will be reconsecrated or made clean, and after this, the horn power shall appear. The answer is really very elegantly and very interestingly stated. Let's dig a little deeper. These angels say so much with so few words. Listen carefully. The answer given by the second angel does not pinpoint a date for the arrival of the Antichrist. Rather, the answer to the question points to an event that will take place before the devil can appear. In other words, the horn power of Daniel 8 cannot appear, in fact, does not even exist prior to 1844. This is why I keep making the point that the horn power of Daniel 8 does not come out of a beast. It doesn't even exist in the form that it will appear. Now, of course, the devil does exist, don't misunderstand me, but he does not exist in the body and in the form that he will take when he's allowed to appear. The 2,300 evenings and mornings are not given a starting date in Daniel 8. In my commentary on the book of Daniel, and I hope you've obtained one and have really tried to study and understand the wonderful story that's found in this book. Since there is no starting date in Daniel 8, many people have distorted the 2300 evenings and mornings, placing them in all kinds of strange and unwarranted places. And I go through a very careful analysis, for example, of how those who believe Antiochus Epiphanes IV is a fulfillment of the horn power of Daniel 8. And I show how that they distort and use the 2300 days and put them in a place that doesn't even closely fit. It's nonsense. And now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that these people aren't honest and sincere. I'm just saying that, like mythological gods, people believed in Venus and Diana, the great god of the Athenians that caused so much trouble for the Apostle Paul. People believe in nonsense, sincerely so. And I'm sure there are lots of things I believe that are nonsense too. But the point here is that the 2300 evenings and mornings go in a very particular place. They serve a very particular purpose, and you need to understand how they come together to really appreciate what God has done. The book of Daniel is masterfully designed. And if you are willing to dig in and roll up your sleeves and put some time into understanding it, you will be thrilled to see what God has done and how He has. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. And it's something you never get tired of examining. It just continues. New things constantly are popping out. So the 2300 evenings and mornings are not given a starting date in Daniel 8. Daniel 8 does not tell us when to start counting 2300 evenings and mornings. And this is where the confusion begins. I need to point out in closing here, we've got to close this section of our seminar, that you may recall back over in the book of Genesis chapter 1, that each evening and morning make a day. So the 2300 evenings and mornings are really 2300 days. God's day begins with evening, and then morning is halfway through. So the evening and the morning were the first day. The evening and the morning were the second day, says Genesis 1. There's a reason why God gave this prophecy in 2300 evenings and mornings, and in our next seminar segment, I'll do my best to explain that. May God bless you, is my prayer.